Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Michelle.
And for those of you that are new here, welcome to our channel. I'm Jessie, and we are Moms on Crime. In this channel, we talk about true crime and anything or everything paranormal. So today, Michelle has a true crime story for us. So what are we talking about today, Mama?
Today I'm going to tell you the story of Alissa Turney. Before I get started, I wanted to remind everybody, please go ahead and subscribe now. It costs you nothing, it's completely free, and what you get in return is more of Jessie and I, and you bring a smile to our face. It means a world to us if you subscribe. So please go ahead and do that now before I get started. Okay, Mama, today's story is about Alissa Marie Turney. This is another Phoenix story, and it's recently been in the news with some big updates. So, Alissa Turney was born April 3rd, 1984. She was described as a kind, caring, hyper, goofy, just funny girl. Her mother and father didn't stay together long after Alissa was born. So when she was 3 years old, her mother, Barbara, met Michael Turney, and they quickly fell in love, and they were married in 1987 when Alissa was just 3 years old. So quickly he became her stepfather. Michael had children from a previous marriage, so very quickly Alissa was given some siblings, and she suddenly had 3 older stepbrothers. And after a while, Michael and Barbara ended up having another child. This would be Sarah's, or Alissa's half-sister, Sarah. And that was 4 years after they were married in 1987, so Alissa at this time was 7. Michael was a deputy for the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in the 70s and a baseball coach and Boy Scout leader for his sons as they were growing up. So he was really just described back then as a family man, and he really liked to portray this image as like a very Brady blended family. Like that's how everybody kind of saw this family, very Brady Bunch-esque. When he got laid off from his job in the electrical field after he suffered an injury in 1992, his personality suddenly changed, and Super Dad went away pretty quickly, and this was just a very hard, trying time for this family because within 3 weeks, Alissa's mother, Barbara, passed away from cancer, and everything changed in their life for the kids. I don't know if it's just their dad had so much stress suddenly being a single father, and I mean, I know that's probably very scary, and you probably feel so lost, and you just want to do what's right, but what her sister Sarah now describes is kind of odd behavior. Maybe that Michael was very strict on Alissa, but not on the other kids, especially not Sarah. Sarah said with her, he was a very laid back, cool dad, very easygoing, but with Alissa, he was very strict, very disciplined with her, and he would say it was because she would get into trouble, but Sarah describes it as your typical teenage behavior, ditching school and, going and messing around with your friends. So it's 2 different descriptions. Alissa's father, Michael, will say that she was out of control, but Sarah says no, it was your typical teenage stuff where she would just kind of ditch school here and there, but she wasn't out of control. She did good in school. So it would come to light that Michael was so strict with Alissa that he would often search her belongings, and he had surveillance equipment in and outside of the home. He had multiple cameras recording all the comings and goings of the home, and there was also recording devices on the telephones, and he would routinely monitor the phone calls. He would listen to phone calls in the house, and I mean, we've all been teenage girls. I can't imagine if my dad listened in on my phone calls and just the complete invasion of privacy. Alissa actually worked at Jack in the Box, and he would often sit in the parking lot and record her while she was inside working, and I guess it was kind of just so bizarre that it actually upset her manager. And I saw this home video that he was recording where she came outside and was kind of like, "Dad, stop, you're gonna get me in trouble at work, my manager doesn't like it." So May 17th, 2001, it was Alissa's last day of school before summer was out. She was a junior at Paradise Valley High School. Her father, Michael, picked her up for lunch, and he says this was something that happened often. So he claims that during the lunch, they got into an argument because Alissa was asking for more privileges in the home, and he was saying no, and she got upset. So she stormed off to her room, and he claims that he left the home to go run some errands around 1 p.m. And he came back home at 5, and Alissa was not home, and she was not answering her cell phone. So her sister Sarah was also her last day of school, and she had gone on a field trip that day to a water park, and she knew her father was supposed to pick her up from school, but as Sarah describes it, he didn't show up. And her and a friend walked to her house, and nobody answered the door. Her dad wasn't home, so they quickly scribbled a note with some paper that they had in their bag, and they left it at the door that she was going to be at her friend's house, and then they walked over to her friend's. So sometime after 5 o'clock, Michael shows up at Sarah's friend's house to pick her up, and he is frantic. And right away, he uses the words that Alyssa's missing. She's not answering her phone, and he doesn't know where she is. So he says, here, you use my phone and you try to call her, but of course she doesn't answer. Sarah and her father Michael get home, and he tells her, why don't you go to her room and, take a look around. So Sarah says she got into Alyssa's room, and the contents of her backpack were just scattered all over her bed, and on the dresser was her purse and her phone, and there was a note stating, basically, Dad and Sarah, you guys wanted me gone. Well, here you go. You're getting what you want. I'm going to California. I'm not coming back. So Michael calls the police, but quickly they decide that she's a runaway, and there's no follow-up or investigation done. And I guess they decide this based off of Michael's description of Alissa, that she's this wild child that often, ditches school and kind of goofs around, and they really believed him. And about a week later, Michael tells police that Alissa had called the home from California and basically just said, well, I'm not coming back. But when police asked to listen to the phone call, since he had the recording devices on there, he said, oh, you know what? Crazy thing, it's actually not working. So this phone call that supposedly took place was never recorded by the monitoring, by the recording devices that he had on the phones. And police asked if the cameras in the home had, caught footage from the day Alissa went missing. And he says, oh, I actually looked it over. I reviewed it myself, and there's nothing of interest on there. There's nothing. You can't see anything out of the ordinary. So he actually never showed police footage from that day. So police, they kind of doubted the story, but they didn't have a lot to go on. And so police, they kind of doubted the story, but they didn't have a lot to go on for the investigation because Michael had just stopped communicating with police. The relationship was very strained. They were still pushing for footage from that day and audio recordings of phone calls, but he pretty much refused. He wouldn't give them anything. So police did doubt his story, but they didn't have enough to go on to charge him with anything in Alyssa's disappearance. So at this point, he's no longer cooperating. Details of the last day she was seen were scarce, and he refused to sit down with police for an interview or a polygraph test. He just flat out refused to do it. So at this point, in 2008, he is no longer communicating with detectives by phone, through email, nothing. So December 11, 2008, Sarah gets a call from detectives that they want to speak to her about a break in the case. And she goes down to headquarters, and at this point is when they tell her they are actually raiding her father's home. So what happened this day is at the home, police showed up and they wanted to speak with Michael Turney, and they wanted to get a handwriting sample from him. And when they approached him, he actually had weapons on him. He was armed with a knife and a pair of guns and a bunch of clips, which is like super odd. I don't know what he expected was going to happen. So once they got inside the home that he was living in, and I guess the home across the street was the home they lived in when Alissa disappeared, they actually found 30 improvised explosive devices. So I guess later on they described them as pipe bombs. And they had like 19 high caliber assault rifles and 2 handmade silencers, and there was a van on the property. It was like filled up with gasoline. So Phoenix police would describe this as the largest seizure of IEDs the police department had ever made. So they get in the home and they're searching, and they find tons and tons of VHS tapes of Alissa in her home dating back to the 80s. And again, there was no tapes from the day she disappeared, but just odd. Tons and tons of hours of videotape from inside his home of his children, and also just, you know, their daily lives. He recorded everything. They also found contracts Michael had written and made Alissa sign, and her sister said one of the contracts was from a year before her disappearance, and he made Alissa state in it that she had never been molested by him. So at this point, police start, you know, talking to her friends from, you know, back when she was a teenager, and her boyfriend from the time she disappeared. And they learned from these friends and from her boyfriend that Michael had tried to sexually abuse Alissa. And she told her friends about it, and he would make her sign statements stating that she would not tell on him. And her boyfriend from the time she disappeared recalled a conversation that he had with Alissa when she told him that one day her dad had picked her up early from school and tried to fool around with her. So it kind of makes you wonder about the day that she disappeared, when he picked her up early from school for lunch, what really happened. And Alissa also told her friends that one night she woke up tied to a chair and gagged, and her stepfather Michael was on top of her. There was also a 98-page document found in the home explaining the reason for the stockpile of weapons. It was titled The Diary of a Madman Martyr, and Michael had written that he believed the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers had abducted and murdered Alissa. When he worked in the electrical field in the 80s, he had complained about workplace conditions, and he believed the union had held a grudge against him ever since and had kidnapped Alissa as punishment. He wrote that he had killed the 2 assassins who killed Alissa and buried her remains in the desert near Desert Center, California. He also wrote that he planned on an operational plan to continue to seek revenge by blowing up the Union Hall, by driving an explosive-laden van into the building, and shooting any survivors that came out of the front door. And so police really think that by raiding his home that day, they saved a bunch of lives. Like, they prevented a mass murder from taking place in Phoenix. So, as the years went by, her sister Sarah really started to doubt her father's story, and she, while he was in jail for the weapons charges, she really pushed him and asked questions about her sister Alissa, and he refused to speak with her about it. And she actually said that up until 2008, she never knew that her father took Alissa out of school early that day. She was told by him that Alissa just never came home from school, and she learned later in life that he actually had picked Alissa up early. And as time went on, she did learn that all of Alissa's belongings were still in the home: her makeup, her hairbrush, her cell phone, her purse, everything. And there was $1,800 in her bank account that was never touched. And because of all these things, this is why she finally came to understand. This is why police were looking at her father. So as Sarah grew up, she actually started to work with foster children in Arizona that were victims of abuse and abandonment and neglect. And she started like her own media campaign. In the early 2000s, she started a website called helpfindalissa.com, and she has really been pushing for answers for her sister. And if anybody is on TikTok, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but I've seen her on TikTok. Her sister, Alissa Turney, she started her own, like on her TikTok, on her account, but she has used it as a platform to speak out about her father, Michael, because she believes her father, Michael, murdered her sister, Alissa. So on TikTok, her videos are all about justice for Alissa and help me push the police to make an arrest or look into my sister's case. Like, just help me push this further because my sister deserves justice. And she's been very vocal about many family members have stopped speaking to her because she's so outspoken against her father. But there is a huge update on this story. So her father was actually released August 2017 for the weapons and pipe bomb charges. And just recently, within a couple of weeks, and I really think it was due to her sister Sarah's efforts on TikTok and her website, Michael Turney was arrested on August 20th, 2020, and he has been charged with second-degree murder of his stepdaughter, Alissa Turney. And, as you can expect, it's been very emotional for her sister Sarah. I've seen her, she released a couple of statements on her Twitter, I believe. I don't think she's been on TikTok much, because I think it's been really heavy on her, But she released a statement, that she was, happy that her sister was finally getting the justice that she deserves. The website is still up if anybody wants to go on there and take a look, or maybe if you think you know anything about this, there's also on the website Charlie Project. Alyssa's story is also on there, and tons of TV shows and other channels and podcasts have covered this story. So my hope for Sarah is that her father will now find it in his heart to say what really happened that day with Alissa, and she can be brought back home and given the respect that she deserves and the justice that she deserves. That is our story for today on Alissa Turney. I hope you guys really enjoyed this story. If you did, and if you enjoy our other channels, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And you can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Momsoncrime. And if you have any ideas for any stories you think we should cover, please leave it below in the comments, or you can also email us at momsoncrime@gmail.com. That's our story for today, guys. We'll see you next time.